You've been saying you want to write a book since forever, and I hate that for you because in this day and age, it is easier than ever to publish your story with confidence, and yet you're choosing to be disobedient with your gifts and talents instead. Ouch. If you're new here, my name is Katie Bennett. I am a best-selling author, the founder of Lexicon Presents Publishing, and your host for Drafts Don't Count because they don't. Either you're going to do the work or you're going to continue to drive everyone around you crazy by talking about and getting free dopamine from stuff that you know you have no plans of doing. Now, this week, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I am going to be reading out of one of the ebooks that is available on our website, lexiconpresents.com. You do have an option where you can just go out and you can buy it outright. I think it's only $10 if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, if you know that you're really serious about your writing career, I highly encourage you to just sign up for our newsletter where we send out free writing promotions and free writing opportunities along with motivation, tips, tricks, etc. to help you get past the finish line and accomplish the dreams in which you're hoping to accomplish by telling your story. And so this particular book that we're going to be reading out of, which is Your Story Matters, I have a whole section there which goes into the different ways in which you can be published. Publishing industry is not heavily regulated. If you go and you hire an attorney and they do something you don't like, you can go straight to the bar and make your complaint knowing that they're going to handle that. If you hire a doctor who doesn't do what they're supposed to do, you can run straight to the board, make your complaints, and know that there is going to be a process. That doesn't necessarily exist, if you will, here in the publishing space. It's very unregulated. And that's why one of the things that pains me as a publisher and an author is when we get someone coming through our pipeline and we can tell that they've been just bottled down with really bad information. And I'm not one to hate on anyone or to talk down on what anybody's doing. But when you see those ads that's like, oh, we'll get you published on over 200 platforms for only $200. Baby. They'll be throwing out all types of stuff. They're like, oh, we're going to do formatting and cover design and editing and do the work for you for 200. And some of y'all, your common sense doesn't kick in to say, why am I getting so much for so little? And then when you spin the block and you come to somebody like myself, who I know that when you do business with me, there's a lot of integrity there. We have a whole system here called our faith system, which is fairness, accountability, integrity, teamwork, and honor, right? So that means that those are the pillars in which we're always operating under. So when you come over here and I give you a quote of some sort that is way above what they gave you, now you're looking at me like I'm crazy or I'm just the one trying to take your money. When in reality, because it's not regulated, if you don't do your homework, you're trusting somebody with something that was already hard for you to do. I'm not going to have time to run through all of them. Just know that if this is something that you're interested in seeing for yourself, just go to lexiconpresents.com, do that little pop-up. There's going to be a pop-up box that says nothing changes if nothing changes. It asks for your contact information. Once you provide that contact information, you're going to receive an email. In that email, it will have the link and a code that you can use to go straight to that link, provide the code, and then it lets you download the ebook for free. In that ebook, there's also information to where if you're like, yo, honestly, I don't think I have enough for a full manuscript. There's different ways in which you can be published and you can tell your story with confidence. I have all different types of tips and tricks, and it was written with the idea of being more of a workbook to help hold you accountable while providing you with a ton of resources and information. So before we dive into and just really, because there's a lot of them, just kind of bullet point this through for you, I want you to know, and it's here in the ebook, it says, please note, I'm not an attorney, nor am I acting as one, but the following pages are meant to empower you to ask questions you need to have answered before you sign anything. Things like, who owns the rights and the working files if we part ways? How do royalties work? And when do I get paid? Is there an advance? If yes, how is it recouped? What marketing is included? and what isn't. That's major, because in stepping away from this for a quick second, you will find publishers that will expect to be the highest person on the receiving end of your royalties, and then they don't have a marketing plan or strategy. They expect you to do all the heavy lifting. So not only did you do 100% of the work to write the book, you're going to be the one doing 100% of the work to sell the book, and then they're recouping more money than you. That, to me, was always problematic and part of the reason why we have Lexicon Presents now. So now jumping back to what we were reading. Where will the book be sold, and how will I see sales? What's the timeline, and how can either of us end the deal? Those are very important things to have discussed and to understand. Now, before I run into this list, I do want to remind you that this is a 4-step process. So you have planning, writing, editing, and publishing. So everything that we're talking about here is on that 4th step, and publishing is the only thing that we're talking about. So we're not talking about the writing of the manuscript or editing of that, although there will be some different things kind of trickled through in here, because some publishing houses, hybrid publishers, or boutique publishing services that do offer editing services. But I want to highlight to you, all we're discussing right now is that 4th step, which is publishing. And this is something you should be thinking about all the time, not just in the planning phase, but also as you're writing and editing. These are things you should be taking into consideration and just deciding if this still is in alignment with what you said you wanted to do. So the first option is what we all think of when we think of publishing our story, and that's traditional publishing. This is something that's great if you want prestige, you want a full editorial team, and you don't want to be required to pay out those out-of-pocket expenses up front. Now, I do have to let you know that if you receive some sort of advancement from a traditional publisher, if you think that you're getting all of their services and their help and it's not going to come with the cost, or you're paying for it in some way, shape, form, or fashion, make sure you're reading that contract. So the greatest thing about this is that oftentimes, if you don't need to use anybody for ghostwriting services, if you use a traditional publisher, you'll get help with the editing, the formatting, the marketing, all the things. The downside to that is sometimes how they split up the royalties. Sometimes they want more of the royalty amount than you're going to see. Sometimes they want you to change things in your story that you wouldn't normally change, like it was in my experience. They wanted me to change things that I didn't feel comfortable changing. And so they have a lot of creative control, and they're really the final decision maker when it comes to making difficult decisions on your books. The next one that we have is hybrid publishing, which is what Lexicon Presents is. We're a hybrid publisher. So I'm not giving you an advancement, but I will kind of work with you as a partner in publishing, if you will, right? I'll give you access to my team, to my resources. You usually will take care of some sort of budget. There's a payment that goes along with it, but you have a little bit more creative control than if you were working with the traditional publisher. Because here, my goal isn't to change your story. I recognize that you were given this story for a reason, and we got to tell it like it was told to you or fed to you in your spirit, and that's what's the most important thing. So what's really good about this is you do usually have more money coming back to you, and you don't have all of the expenses you would have if you chose to do it yourself. One thing that is important to note with this, not every hybrid publisher is going to include some sort of marketing for you, so you will want to take a look at that. Another thing worth noting here is that whenever you're working with hybrid publishers, they will typically share with you their packages. They'll say, oh, well, we've got a silver, platinum, and gold package, and each package comes with its own thing of what it covers. And that's something that is typical that you will see. Be mindful of the packages and recognize, is this something that is going to serve you? Go through it line by line. Ask the questions necessary to see if there's an option to go with a lower package and maybe add some of those services that you need specifically a la carte. There's a reason why when you go on Lexicon Presents, we're not bottling you down with a ton of package options, and that's just because we recognize that everyone is different. And that's why it's important with us, at least, that you book your consultation first. We hear your goals, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, so that we tailor a very individualized package for you. So just consider, if you know that you don't want to do all of the work yourself, and you also don't want to hand over a ton of creative control to someone else, you do have the option to use a hybrid publishing company to give you a little bit more of that support while also having the creative control that any author wants when telling their story. Now, I'm not going to hold y'all. I got to run through this, and we got a couple more options here left to go. So the other option is to self-publish. Self-publishing is great because guess who's maintaining 100% of those royalties? Love it for you. The problem is, guess who owns 100% of the mistakes, the failures, and all of the hard lessons that get learned in that process? Self-publishing has its pros and its cons. So those are some things to consider and to think about. I always want to tell everybody to consider all their options because, and I'm spending more time here than I wanted to, but I need you to know that sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you know you have long-term goals with this book, yes, you can absolutely self-publish on your own. But if you don't have a lot of the insurances or protections that you're supposed to have, or you don't know necessarily how to take those steps and those directions, you really could be putting the cart before the horse and setting yourself up for destruction later on if you are not careful or not knowledge of some things along the way. I never want to discourage anyone from self-publishing. 1000% you should do whatever you feel led to. It's how I got started in the game. But it is also worth noting that if you know that there's certain awards and things that you want to apply for, some of them are not open to you when you're self-published or you're missing certain things. So if you're not investing in a coach who's going to hand walk you through a lot of processes and procedures, just know that you could be hurting your bottom dollar or your bottom line before you've even gotten started. Anyway, I've said all of that to say this. There is no excuse why you cannot be a published author. There is no excuse why you can't be published today, depending on what your goals and what your why is. So as you're going through and we're wrapping up this time that we have together, there's a lot of things you need to be considering. If you're going the traditional publishing route, you need to be researching your publishing houses and what their requirements are. If you know you want to go with a hybrid publisher, you need to be researching and figuring out who's more in alignment with what you've got going on. If you say, I want to do all of the work and self-publish myself, I highly encourage you to work with some sort of coach or industry insider that can help you to make sure that everything is done correctly so that you're not paying for it on the back end. And finally, if you're like, those options are just a little bit more than I'm comfortable with aligning myself with right now, then you need to go align yourself with one of these other options. But either way, you need to stop playing around. So now that you have this information, you already know what you need to do. Get to writing.